Good morning. Well, a very warm welcome to everyone. I can see we're all logging in. Thank you for that, and welcome to this webinar. This is, of course, a series, the UNI Leadership webinar series from Inspire One. And what we're looking at today, friends, is how to maximize your leadership potential through coaching. So it's quite an interesting, different view. We've probably heard a lot of webinars. We've been a part of them, attended on coaching itself, what is coaching, etc. But this webinar is a bit different. The focus is on you as you are going through a coaching session. And of course, as leaders and managers of potential coachees, are attending, it will also help us to just get an inside perspective of how my coachee is feeling. But really, the intent of this webinar is for us to look at what can I do to get the most or to build my potential through coaching. So we have with us this morning, it's the two of us, and a brief introduction to Mr. Deepak Mola. Of course, Deepak is our MD at Inspire One. He's an executive coach. He coaches a lot of senior executives. He's been doing this for a number of years. He himself is an industry stalwart, sits on the board of companies today, used to be one of his roles in the past was the managing director at Modi Group. So really a lot of experience that we would certainly like to leverage, especially as Deepak, no doubt, through his experience will look back and share with us experiences that give us, all of us, insights into the mind of someone going through coaching. And of course, myself, Craig, happy to be here on this panel, coach pursuing PCC right now. Hopefully that should close soon. But of course, have been and continue to do a lot of coaching, listening to everyone that we've been engaging with over the last few years, actually. So Deepak, anything you'd like to say as we welcome our participants in to the session this morning?
Well, good morning, firstly, to everyone, and thanks for joining this webinar. I think what I would like to talk is a little bit on the subject, how to maximize your coaching if you are working on leadership development. I think all of us realize, people who have been in leadership roles or who are getting into leadership roles, that there's a huge amount of complexity which one has to deal with. And leadership development has been, I think, over the last 2 decades, a subject matter of great experimentation, great amount of experience, research. And still, I don't think anywhere we are got the answers to all the problems. Obviously not. It's an evolving process. But when you look at leadership development and you look at the various options available to you of the way I could create or develop my leadership capabilities, I think coaching is right at the top in today's context. And what we are noticing is that over the last 2 decades, at a time when 2 decades ago, I would say that coaching was probably a subject which was not too much heard of, forget about being known. And it was being done maybe under different garbs, under different labels, but it just about started. And to where we are now, that a large number of executives, and of course, a very large number of organizations are looking upon coaching as probably the major focus of their leadership development armory. So if they have their choices and if they could, they probably would like to use coaching as the best or preferred method of leadership development. So when there is so much focus on coaching, and obviously it is going to multiply, we see it multiplying and it's coming down from the, let's say, the higher echelons of leadership or management, which was at one time the exclusive preserve of the CEO and his first line. Coaching was done primarily at that level. Today, you're finding it gradually seeping to the senior management level and now even to middle management level. And I think companies are identifying, are really experiencing the benefit of coaching. So that is from an organization point of view. That how does coaching help organizations to develop people in leadership roles? So that is one perspective. Today, it is a well-known, well-acknowledged perspective. It is well-understood perspective. However, when we see the whole process from the other end, the coachee's end, right? How does the coachee get maximum value out of this? Quite a few of us probably have been through coaching experience at the instance of the organization. When the organization said, okay, we are nominating you for either a leadership development program which has coaching, or we are nominating you for a coaching process, it's not necessary that the person himself or herself has volunteered or said that, yes, I would like to go through that. That is changing. And when that is changing, then the question comes up that if I have to make that investment, if I have to make that decision that I want to take take myself through a coaching development process, then how do I ensure that I get what I really want? How do I ensure that I get the maximum value out of this process? Whether it is something which I'm nominated by the company or sponsored by the company, or I have sponsored myself. And that may come as a surprise to some of us, but we are finding a lot of senior executives and middle-level executives sponsoring themselves for a coaching experience. And that tells you that the coaching process has, to some degree, arrived in the country. Yeah. So when I, as a coach, I'm going through this process, I think it's very important for me as a coachee, right, to understand how do I maximize the value out of this process. I think that's really the purpose of this webinar. Unlike many other webinars which focus a lot on how to coach, here the question is, how do you get coached effectively? And I think that's the perspective which I think is extremely important and relevant from today's context, where we find more and more people making a conscious choice of taking a coaching development process. How do I maximize that? And that's really what Craig and I would like to, over the next 45 minutes, give our perspective to you as coachees. How do you maximize from the experience which you are going through or you would like to go through, right? I think so. That's probably what I wanted to share with them. Craig,
absolutely. And I think some of the conversations I've been having with leaders around coaching, we've been hearing comments like, my organization has a coach for me, but I would like my own coach as well, because there are things I want to work on. And the beauty of coaching, of course, is it allows, it's very, very customized. It's tailor-fit, it's bespoke, it's made for me. Of course, that brings responsibility because it's made so uniquely for me that I can get as much out of it as I put in. But certainly seeing those trends of leaders using coaching more and more, certainly organizations using coaching a lot. And even if I'm nominated, how can I make the best of it? So then, Deepak, of course, there are many coaching organizations, and Inspire One, for the last 23 years, has been in development. But what are our credentials, so to speak, to speak on this topic? What could why does our opinion matter? Our view matter?
I think it's important to understand that if we are saying what we are saying, to with what degree of confidence should you accept or should you listen, and even challenge, of course, challenge what we are saying. So Inspire One has been in the business of leadership development for over almost a quarter of a century now. And that's a fairly long time. So we have been in this business not only in India, but we've done a good amount of work in other countries as well. We were part of a global network which did a significant amount of work in researching what makes a person successful in a leadership role in a VUCA world, in a world which is highly chaotic. Whatever we are seeing right now is probably a small part of it. So what makes a person successful in a leadership role? So this research was conducted by a professor from London Business School, Tony Cockerill. We were a part of that process, along with many other industries and institutions which participated. And we identified a framework, which was called the High Performance Behavior Framework. And through that framework, there was 12 behaviors were identified which make a person successful in a leadership role in today's context. And this is an ongoing research. We keep on getting empirical data from the work which we do, which goes back into it and then comes out as something evolving, changing, and so on. So we've been using that framework, which is based on the nature-nurture concept, that answering the question, are leaders born or are they made? And obviously our answer is, our research has shown that leaders, there is an element of both. There are some parts of a leader which are born, which is part of a personality. And then, of course, there's a huge amount of development which a person goes through over the course of his life or her life. And the more challenges they face, the more the leadership development process evolves. So it's a combination of both what we call nature and nurture. So we've been working within this framework for the last, as I said, almost a quarter of a century. And we've worked with many, many organizations, both in India and overseas, in developing leaders. Earlier on, I would say how leadership has evolved. And maybe earlier on, leadership was a bit of a misnomer. So what was called managerial skills, right, of planning, organizing, doing things, of reviewing things, of managing, it was more a knowledge-based activity and a process-based activity. So you would have a process for carrying out a review, for example, of planning, of reviewing that performance and ensuring that it gets done. But over a period of time, and this I'm talking of almost maybe as recent as 20 years ago, so most of the development programs were around management development, not necessarily leadership development, although it was part of a euphemism to call them as leadership development programs. However, very soon, organizations and people realized, and this is all part of ongoing research globally, that behind that knowledge and processes, there is a human mind, a human behavior, which makes that process successful or that knowledge create value. And what is that? That was what we called the leadership behaviors, which part of the research which we were taking through with Tony Cockerill. And that those leadership behaviors then became what was really the backbone of leadership development per se. So leadership development, when we focus on, is largely around behavioral development, whereas managerial skills are something which is the basic level, right? But thereafter, when you want to move up the organization or take higher responsibilities in any kind of organization, corporate, NGO, or any other, then those leadership skills or leadership behaviors become something which you cannot do without. And so most of the development in the last 2 decades has been around leadership behavioral development. And when you go into leadership behavioral development, coaching becomes a necessary part of it. Because imagine yourself when you are, some of you may have children and you tend to coach them in certain behaviors at a very young age. And of course, it continues as they progress, and then they move on to other areas and they get other coaches, whether it's a sports coach or whether it's a coach for engineering, they go for coaching classes for doing various things, but they're mostly knowledge related. But behavior related is something which starts with coaching, where you do one-to-one coaching, whether it's with a child, etc., etc. Now, this started evolving, as I said, almost 2 decades ago, where it was a very small part of the whole leadership development. So we have also, over a period of time, in our repertoire of services to the organizations, moved into other areas besides leadership workshops. So there was earlier on, the focus was largely around leadership workshops, do leadership workshops, and then move away. But very quickly we realized that leadership behavior is not a matter of a workshop. Behavior development takes time, takes months. So if I have a habit, if I have a certain behavior, and if I want to change it or want to acquire a new behavior, for example, I may not be very good at being able to influence others, be able to create a network. Now, that's not part of me. It's not part of my nature. But can I develop myself? Sure, you can. But can I do it just by attending a 3-day or a 5-day workshop? Sorry, you cannot. Right? You will have to work maybe with a strong degree of conviction over a period of months before you can say, okay, now I have developed the behavior of being able to influence. It is still not very comfortable to me. It is still not something which has become a part of me. But yes, I have started developing those. Very often we find, to give an example, you would be surprised that 50% of the people in sales are introverts. And most of them are also very successful. So you would say, how can they be successful in a sales role, which requires a very strong extrovertish nature, with someone who's basically an introvert? And that's where the individual has, by taking on that role, taken up that challenge, and over a period of time, become more extrovert in whatever they show. But their comfort is still to be an introvert when they are on their own. So that is the power of development. And when you're talking of behavioral development, which take months, as I said, coaching becomes a very critical part of that. And that's how we evolved in our, as I said, repertoire of solutions over the last many years, from workshops to assessments and workshops, and then to assessment, to workshop, to coaching, and to have a whole process which makes a person evolve as a leader. So we've been doing that for the last maybe almost 2 decades now, and we still keep on evolving ourselves. We are strong in the area of emotional intelligence, which has proven to be one of the major ingredients for leadership, a successful leadership role. So all these, I think, have evolved with us over the period of the last 2 decades. And I'm very happy to share with all the participants here that as a result, we have been able to get some Brandon Hall Awards. Also, we've been able to train people not only in India, but globally, and really make this process something which is a benchmark in the industry. So that's what we have been doing over the last 20 years or so. Craig, back to you.
No, wonderful. So obviously the view is coming from a lot of experience. The view is coming from having evolved over the years, seeing that evolution in development, and it's coming from a deep passion to develop. And essentially, coaching is about development. It's when we know there is a choice, but there's also a chance to change, to improve, and to maximize that potential that we are speaking about. So there's hope for all of us. So it's very inspiring knowing that, but also comforting that all of us, we can make that effort and then use a coach, and a coach can help us to do a lot. So let's move a little bit further. I think we've set the context now quite well. If we move a little bit further into the reality, and Deepak, you touched upon this, that today there are many options when it comes to development, right? There's and one, you look at it as evolving over the years. You see some trends. The other is still relevant. I mean, are we saying that we don't use other methods? Number one. And if they're all still relevant, then why choose coaching, or where should I choose coaching?
So I think the answer is fairly obvious. When you go to a training program, you are one amongst 10, 15, 20 universities and campuses. It could be even hundreds. So the amount of focus is on you as an individual, or what the program design is, caters to the the largest common factor. It doesn't take into account your specific needs. Whereas in coaching, you are the focus, right? So everything which is done with you as the only customer, as the only recipient of that know-how of that process. So whatever I have to create a process, I will cater it for you. I cannot have a generic process and assume that you will get the same benefit, which I would do if I was to do for a group of 20 odd people. So workshops, etc., are good for imparting knowledge, right? For imparting some skills. But when it comes to behavioral side, as I mentioned, then those have to be something which I can only access if I have a person who's dedicated in their efforts towards me. So if I know that I need to get myself, I am not very comfortable, I'm socially awkward, I find it difficult to go out and meet with people, and I want to get over that, because that is going to be a limiting factor for my growth, very clearly. So if I want to grow, then I need to be able to handle that. Now, a workshop may not be the answer for me, but someone who creates a solution based on my strengths, my needs, and helps me through that over a period of months, I think that's where the obvious answer comes. Why coaching? If one could afford it, one would say that there would be only coaching, and there would be some element of learning or knowledge acquisition, which comes through workshops, self-development, etc., etc. But coaching clearly has a big advantage, because the focus is only you. There is no process which is generic. It is guided by your needs and your requirements.
Yeah, and I think one of the buzzwords in industry is customization and hyper customization. And when it comes to development, there couldn't be anything more customized, more tailor fit than coaching. It's just for me. And what that does for me as a coachee is I can open up completely, knowing that the more I open up, it will help me really get that option that's really tailor fit. So of course today, as we mentioned earlier, just reiterating, we're focusing on that point of view, from the coachee's point of view. So here are some reasons for coaching. Why do people look at coaching? As you're thinking about it being customized, what are some of those situations? Now, according to ICF, interestingly, last year was the year to find a coach. And so many have already started on that journey. Perhaps you have too. If you haven't yet, this is a good time to look for a coach. And we're going to consider that in this session in a little while. And we'll talk about even how do we find and choose a coach. But some reasons for coaching, typical reasons, right? If we want to optimize our individual or our work performance, to improve communication skills, quite a large one, increase productivity, there's always that pressure, expand career opportunities, increase self-esteem, self-confidence. Deepak touched upon our strength in emotional intelligence and the ability to address some of these areas, manage work-life balance, improve business management. We'll talk about some of our advanced methods, something we'll refer to later as anchor coaching, as a way to address some of these needs, even while looking at coaching. So as we move forward now, maybe what we'll do is we'll just bring up a slide again on just looking at what will we cover in this session. Again, as I bring that up, a couple of things. One, again, just an ICF research report on how organizations use coaching. We touched upon that earlier, that companies and organizations increasingly are looking at coaching as a key lever for development. And you can see the host of reasons. One is it's a part of leadership development programs, and we do some of those high potential type of journeys where coaching is an element. Or it could be just a development opportunity for employees. They could choose it. We have engagements that we work with companies in that way as well, or it could be an individual may choose to pick up and develop some of their own strengths. So with that context, here's what we're going to cover over the next half an hour or so in this webinar. One, how can I prepare to get the best out of coaching? Who should be my coach? How to choose a coach? What are some success factors for me to keep in mind? How can I measure my own success? Get the most out of my investment, the investment of my time. What should I do post a coaching session? And then what are we'll just close on some coaching options. In the meantime, friends, please feel free. If you have any questions as we are discussing, please feel free. You can type in your question and we'll answer them. We don't need to wait till the end for your question. Something pops into your mind straight away, please make a note of it, and then we'll talk through that as we move forward. So let's then start at the very beginning, and we'll go back to Deepak with this question. How or what should we as a coachee, should we prepare ourselves, or how can we prepare ourselves before we start out on a coaching? Maybe my organization is thinking of it, maybe I've heard of it, maybe I plan on doing it myself. What should I do before I jump into coaching?
I think first thing is that to know and acknowledge that I have some development needs, and that the best way for me to be able to meet those needs will be through a coaching process, right? Because if I do not know that I have some needs, then even if an organization nominates me, I would go through it, but I really would not focus on my development because I think I'm just taking up a process. And that used to be a situation till a few years ago, where people would go for a development program or a coaching process without having the conviction that I would get something out of it, or what do I want to get out of it. So I think two things are important when it comes to what comes to my mind is, one, to know what I want, and that what I want, I think I can get it through coaching. I think these are two important questions which a person must address. Number one, what is it I'm looking for? What are the areas I'm good at? What are the areas I'm not so good at? If I have to grow in my career, then what are the things which will take me further in that growth path? And what are the areas which I believe will stop me from reaching goals? For example, maybe a bit of a generalization here, but in my earlier coaching career, 5 of my 7 coachees were from the finance field. They had reached the top levels of their profession or their capability, and obviously the next role for them was to be considered for the role of the CEO. But what they basically, one of the major areas that they were not so good at was the ability to form relations, the ability to understand another person's point of view, what we may call empathy. And that was one of the biggest challenges that these people were facing for their growth. And they had been told so that, look here, for you to grow into the CEO's role, you need to ensure that you are able to understand another person's point of view. Don't look at it purely from controls, which you have been used to and trained over the last many decades. You would now need to look at the perspective from an overall business, overall humane, overall individual, and individuals involved. And that was what was originally my first 5-7 coaches assignments I did. So it was important for those people to understand that it is going to be a showstopper for me if I do not develop myself. And I think that's the important for which I would say that I must know what is the showstopper for me. That if I do not take care of this, I will find it difficult to break the ceiling or the glass ceiling that I want. And that's number one. Number two, I must know what my strengths are. Because believe you me, the value you're going to create in the future is based on your strengths. Your limitations are going to limit your growth, but they are not going to help you to achieve value. So if you don't take care of them, they are going to ensure that you don't go up. But when you go up, will they help you create value? No, it is your strengths which will create value, which means I need to know what are my strengths, what am I really good at, and what are some of the things which I am not so good at. I think that's the one which is a critical part. So that's the starting point for any such process. So there I would say that getting feedback. Now, of course, there are many instruments available, both psychometrics and otherwise, which help you to get a good understanding, but don't rely only on those. They are important, but they are not sufficient. You need to get feedback from your supervisors, from your co-workers, from your team members, from your family, and try and put together a kind of a SWOT for yourself and be able to say, what is it that I'm really good at? I'm getting that feedback consistently from people in maybe different languages, but meaning much the same. And what is it that I need to focus on to improve myself? And once you have that data, I think that's the starting. And then I think you have to understand that if I was to do this, there are some behaviors which are involved for my growth, and it's not a matter of knowledge and skills, then the best way I can do it is, if I can afford to, and if my organization sponsors me, is to go through a coaching process and focus very clearly on that this is what I want to achieve over the period of months or year or whatever time it takes. So you have a clear knowledge, a clear sight of what I want to achieve, a clear goal. I think that's important. And you have to say that, okay, this goal, what is the best way for me to achieve this goal? Can I do it through a development program or a series of workshops? Or will I be best supported by going through a coaching process in addition to whatever else I may do? And I'm not saying for a moment that coaching can do everything for you, but coaching, especially on behavioral change, I think is a factor which makes a lot of sense, actually.
Absolutely. So we have a set of skills, and then we leverage using them better through coaching. And I'm just thinking, as you were talking, a couple of things. Obviously, I think the very insightful on your showstopper comment. I think oftentimes when we go into a coaching session, we are digging and exploring what do I want? What does a coachee want out of the session? And for me, a coach will always ask, what do you want out of the session? I think the best answer will come if I've thought about what is that showstopper? What's that burning thing that if I work on, if I polish and improve, it'll really open up the world for me. So then I go to as a coachee, I go into the session with a very clear agenda on strengths. Of course, how do I know my strengths? I know for me, I don't know, Deepak, about you, but my wife gives me a lot of feedback, and that gives me, it of course keeps me humble, but also gives me a sense of some of the things that maybe others are not as open to say to me. It's one source, of course. My team gives me honest feedback, and that it's another perspective. These are different perspectives. And of course, all of us have friends who constantly are sharing, giving us views. And so all of that is very, very useful for us to carry forward. And with all of that, one of the things we're trying to find out, we don't want to beat ourselves up by saying what's wrong with you. But we want to use it to identify strengths. In fact, if we think back to the book Outliers, he talks about the 10,000 hours, and that's 10,000 hours on a strength gives us mastery. And so it's a useful principle to keep in mind to to uncover and use strength. So now there are all these various sources around me, and it can be confusing. And I know earlier you alluded to is the part of leadership that's born and the part of leadership that gets developed, that gets built. What could, as a coachee, what could I do to maybe get let's say, a scientific point of view to augment that anecdotal feedback that I'm getting from all around me, including my manager, my friends, my spouse, etc.
So, as I mentioned, there are significant amount of psychometric tools available, which give you an insight into your what we may call the nature part, right? Which is part of the personality, which impacts my leadership behavior. See, there are various elements to a person's personality, but focus on the part which makes an impact on your leadership quantum. And so we use various tools, etc., and they're available in the market, which gives you an idea of what is your leadership orientations. Let me also maybe take a step back. Leadership is a serious business. It's not that everyone's cup of tea. Let's also accept that. People may want to aspire for a leadership role because of the benefits it gives, but I think we must look at what are the challenges it provides. And not everyone may have the orientation to be a leader. And I've seen many people accepting the fact earlier in life and saying, no, I can probably prefer to be a specialist than to be take over a leadership role. And which is more or less confirmed by their nature profile, that their orientation towards leadership is not so strong. And it's important for us to be able to make that assessment early in life so that we are able to make informed choices of which kind of a career. Do I want to be a specialist or do I want to be into a leadership? I think that's number one. And those psychometrics really do help us to do that. And we've seen a number of cases where people have gone and taken on a leadership role for what it promises to give you. But the amount of stress leadership role can provide to a person who does not have the orientation to take on leadership role, I think is a very, very critical factor to keep in mind. Assuming I have that orientation, so that's the first step, that I have that orientation, then it will also tell me what are the strengths in my orientation, in which parts which I am good at, which means with a little bit of effort, I can really go into the capability which could be at a mastery level or an expert level. And there are some orientations which I probably have to work much harder because they don't come so naturally to me. So that is the nature part. And then there's the nurture part, something which I have got developed in over the years that I have been working with the challenges which life has been throwing at me. And those which we look at are the 12 high performance behaviors, which I spoke about earlier in our behavioral framework. And you get your feedback on, in each behavior, where do I stand? Have I already evolved a lot in some of those areas, or am I still at a awareness level or a basic utilization level? And then, of course, there are 360-degree tools, etc., which also give you insights around your nurture, which means your current capabilities, current strength in your behaviors. So this gives you a very strong capability. There are also aspects of derailers, which will take you off unless you take notice of them. Or what are my motivators? A very interesting thing, motivators. A lot of us are driven by the fact we want to do something new. For example, in my personal life, I did not know it till I was much later in my life when these instruments came up, that I really enjoyed doing something new. And hence, in an operational role, I would never be so successful as I would be in starting something different. So my motivator was very strong in the area of starting something new. And that helped me to say, okay, new does not mean I have to start a new venture. New means a new activity. New means anything which requires ongoing activity is not my area of strength. I should move away from there. Ongoing operations, no. But anything new, anything challenging, yes. And it's important for all of us to know what are those motivators for us. It can help us to really unleash a huge amount of strength in us. Imagine a person who's an operation person, motivator, very strong in operations, put into a strategic role. He'll be a total misfit, both for the organization as well as for him. So these are the kind of information today it is possible. Today, behavioral sciences have evolved to such a degree that it can tell us a lot about ourselves, including some of our blind spots per se. So getting good understanding of self, I think there are a lot of information and resources available outside.
Yeah, no,
I'm
absolutely.
Craig, of the
That
time we
framework,
have. Sorry, as I just
yes,
wanted to show
yes.
that I'm mindful of the time we have, so I don't want to spend too much time on. I mean, this is by itself a very significant area of discussion.
Yes, no, thank you for that, and obviously, I mean, it's lovely to get that insight, right? That I should be looking at myself from a nature and a nurture perspective, yeah, and then take all the other input, put them all together, and that will help me maybe get a deeper understanding of my strengths. What we know is that when we use strengths are things we really enjoy doing. It fuels me, and we don't tire out when we use our strengths. And so it makes any development sustainable. And so we want to keep that in mind, not to get overly bogged down by negative areas that may slow me down. Of course, I want to look at development and what I need to improve, but the big question we perhaps want to ask ourselves is, how do I leverage my strengths, that energy that comes from my strengths, to help me continue to grow? And these frameworks can be really, really useful in opening that up for me, so that I can be clear of what I want out of a coaching session. Obviously, when we look at the coach itself, we now know how to prepare ourselves. Now, as part of preparation, I need to choose a coach, right? And maybe I should. Can I take any coach? Will any coach do? Is there an element of choice? You think?
I think the good thing is that the universe today has many more coaches than what they were in the past. And to that extent, and they are growing, and the tribe is growing of coaches. The downside of it is that I have too many choices, so I do not know how to make the right choice, right? So I can spend, so it's good to be clear. So if I have already done my first exercise of knowing what I want to focus on, what do I want to achieve, so that helps me to say, okay, I want to have a coach who can help me in these 2-3 areas, which I have probably been able to identify for myself as areas of development, right? I think to go for a known coach or someone who's got some references, etc., helps you to ensure that it mitigates the risk factor to some degree. But it does not mean that the people who have had good experiences, that you will also have a good experience with them. So what will ensure that you will have a good experience with them is, so first is the process, the coaching process. Is a person familiar with that process, etc.? So a certification is a good way to know that the person has a certain process. Industry experience, from my point of view, is one of the most critical ones, because that helps you to ensure that there is, in addition to academic rigor, there is also the actual experience which a person brings to play. And if the person has had experience in various fields, it helps to give me a much broader perspective than a person who is maybe having a lot of academic rigor, a lot of certification, but may not necessarily have that capability which I may require. So I may be requiring only academic rigor, which is fine. But in case my expectation is that I need someone who can help me, who has a good understanding of my industry, so that he can understand the milieu, the environment within which I am working. So then I think I need to have that capability as well, that someone who understands my environment, and so is able to quickly bring to use the technicalities also into a more practical terminology, and help me to understand and apply those, and so on. So I think these are the 4-5 things I would say. So summarizing it in my own mind, I would say a kind of a certification helps to ensure that there's a rigor of the process. Someone who is from understand the industry, I think helps me to do that. someone who's been has had some industry experience, may not be at all levels. I think it also helps me to ensure that the person will be able to bring the academic rigor and the corporate experience to bear, right? And then, of course, then you want to say, okay, someone should be able to also be able to guide me through the process on a long-term basis, and should be able to do that on a face-to-face basis rather than virtually. Now, if my need is that I need to have someone who's able to meet every week or every month, whatever the situation is, then geography becomes an important factor. But in today's world, if you're looking at the aspect of virtual coaching as well, it gives you a lot more options and a lot more flexibility as well. So I think these are some of the points, and I think Craig, you may want to add to this list.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, some of the ICF research also aligns well. I think some of the things maybe coaches we may not be so comfortable talking about is the reality is it may not always align between a coach and coachee. And so as part of coaching, usually one of the first processes is a chemistry meeting. And so what we'd like to encourage all of you to do as coachees is to invest in that chemistry meeting. Think about ensuring that the chemistry is there. Don't let it be just a formality, because it's even for me, there are experiences where the coaching didn't work. There are experiences where coaching worked brilliantly. And so it's important to find out, for instance, what is the kind of coach you want. Do you want a more directive, firm coach because you feel that discipline will help you? Do you want someone who will be completely non-directive? Strictly speaking, coaching is non-directive, but it's also important to understand culturally myself and what will work well for me, to look at a coach that has the skills that I'm looking at building. If I have an area that I'm struggling with and it's got to do with people, then I may want to look at a coach who's got significant, has a body of work in, for instance, emotional intelligence, a deep understanding to help me work through it, work through my own orientations and build some of those behaviors. But here are some of the other things to look for, when looking for a coach. And you can see the ones right at the top are the credentials, knowledge, etc. All of that becomes very, very important. Now, so we've chosen a coach. You've done your research. You've done a chemistry meeting. You've now identified that you feel this is the coach. You've done your assessments. What could be the success factors now? How do we ensure that we are measuring in some way our success? And I'd like to share with you that we have a panel of coaches, very experienced coaches who are working with a number of people. We've queried our coaches, we've done a survey, and we've got some results. But very, very briefly, Deepak, what could be some success factors? I know you mentioned we don't want to just turn up, right? We want to be there fully, which means also I want to measure myself, hold myself accountable. What are some things we can do as a coachee?
I think from my experience, if I see what are some of the major things which have helped people, is to actually use the coaching in a real live situation, right? So if I was to say that if I start applying whatever I'm going through in a coaching process on a real project, something which is a bit of a challenge to me, then that becomes a good vehicle for me to apply my learning on that particular subject. So I would say that is a very critical part, to be able to create a project which otherwise I would find very challenging to do, but I take it up so that I have got now the coach with me who will be able to guide me through that. Why do I say it is important and it helps a lot? Because development requires challenges. You cannot develop a certain capability if there are no challenges towards that capability. If I'm already good at something, yes, I'll become better at it, but it will not help me to overcome some of the areas which I'm not so good at. So those will only be developed if I am accosted by situations which require me to have that capability. Again, I take the example of influencing. And why do I take that example? Because influencing is, in today's leaders, not a very strong area. So when they have to go outside their domain of authority and be able to carry their point of view, they struggle. Now, if they're going to continue to give them a project or work within their own environment, then where is the challenge for them to develop that capability? So we encourage them to work on projects which necessarily involve them to go outside their domain, outside their area of influence, and work with others who have no commitment to buying their point of view. And to now be able to convince them means they have to start working on their persuasive skills. And that's how things get developed. So one would say that take a situation which provides you with that challenge. It could be a situation, it could be a project, etc. So I think that is one of the critical success factors, I would say, for this. The other part is, how do you measure success? Right? I think if you have got a clarity around that, okay, how would I know that I'm succeeding? So I would say that the project is one part of it. The other is ongoing feedback from your colleagues, from your other stakeholders. So they are able to share with you what is it that the changes that they see in your behavior. And obviously, they're not going to give you a week by week feedback. It will be over months that you will probably get that. You will also find yourself when you're dealing with a situation, how did you overcome that? I'll give you an example to maybe illustrate this. So there was this one coachee I had who was working with a team to achieve something, but for that he needed support of another department. Now, let's say the HR department. So if he went to the HR department, they said, okay, we'll support you. They did a work and motion study and said, okay, we agree with you. You need so many more resources. And so many resources were identified by them and provided by them. He went on with his work, completed his work. But based on the coaching experience, what we had shared with him, what he did differently was he went back to the HR department and he said, okay, guys, based on your feedback, etc., I have been able to achieve my goals. And I would not have been able to achieve those goals if I had not had the support which you provided. Now, what has he done? He's created a bridge somewhere for a long time to come. Not only did he do this, he also in the forum, which was with the supervisors and the HR team supervisors, which is at the leadership level, he acknowledged the support that he got from the HR team to be able to achieve that project for his. Now you can imagine this was not something he would do earlier. He would may take it as a matter of right, complete it and forget about it. But now he took the trouble of creating those bridges, showing them in a good light in front where it mattered, and created a strong relationship. When you do this and you reflect on that, of your action, the action I took and what was the impact of it, I think that's an important part. Being able to reflect on the actions you are taking and in seeing what was the impact of that action or the behavior which you displayed, what was the impact of that on your performance? What was the impact on the behavior of others? And I think that's a vindication which you get of the changes which you are making. So keeping the time factor in mind, I'm just like to limit on 3-4 critical things. One is having a vehicle for developing yourself, which is what we call a project. Number 2, setting yourself a project which is challenging, not something which is easy. Number 3, getting feedback from your colleagues, your stakeholders, over whatever you're doing at some period of time. And most importantly, reflecting on a situation which had been tough for you. What were the actions you took? What was the impact it had? And then recognizing that, okay, this is the behavior which caused this impact, and what am I going to do, either to perpetuate that behavior or to change that behavior, depending on the results which were positive or negative. And there are, of course, many other success measures, but I think I would limit myself for this session to just these 3 or 4 major ones.
Yeah, no, very useful. I think just also to show, some of the results of the survey, just, listening to coaches and especially coaches as they have observed. Obviously, we've mentioned this before, have a clear, honest understanding of self through assessment. The making sure to act on commitments. So which means there is an element of discipline. Coaching will bring in a certain rigor. Now somebody is with you, they're observing, they're going to remind you, they're helping you make yourself a priority. And so just living up to those commitments. It's interesting seeking support of our boss, my boss, my network has worked really well to ensure success. Having an accountability partner before you go in for the session with the coach for your coaching sessions, having questions that you already want to ask. How could we measure? Of course, again, Deepak has mentioned some ways to measure, but here are some that came up through the survey as well. And of course, some of these are a bit more specific, but just looking at am I meeting those hard deadlines? Am I setting hard deadlines, meeting? So on the task, on the messaging, is it received well by others? No, am I now able to package things in a way that is being received well? Am I engaging my direct reports? Am I engaging my boss? Having those clear goals, using 360-degree assessment as a way to indicate pre and post. What's the change? Obviously, things like other metrics, right? ROI, time, money, energy, etc. But having very clear, focused goals is very or measures is very important. So I think we've also been able to incorporate questions that have come in so far. Just to then conclude on this webinar with maybe just a word, Deepak, on how we are positioned. I know we spoke about it in the past, but coaching to be able to address these different needs. What should a company or a coach? What are some of the options we need to offer? Because the needs are a bit varied as we consider.
So a very quick response, because I know we are virtually in the last 2 minutes of the session. I think we've realized that at senior levels, the needs are becoming more and more complex, and sometimes they are not within the ability of a single coach to be able to help the individual. And it's important to recognize that. So what we have developed over a period of time based on need, it's not something which was well thought through, but based on need, and we are finding it becoming more and more relevant, is that there is a lead coach who's taking the primary role of identifying and developing the person. But based on what the other needs are coming, you rope in someone else who's has a better sense and better expertise in that area. For example, someone who's, as I said, I may be very good at strategic thinking side, but I need someone who's helpful on the operations, very much result focused, very much operational. So I may need someone who may help in on that side, on that, bring in a coach for 3-4 sessions, which helps the individual on that, but I maintain the continuity. So as the lead coach, I maintain the continuity. And that similarly, there could be someone coming in from maybe a self-confidence. The person has to develop his self-confidence. That's another need. So maybe that's another person, coach we get in for that purpose. So basically, there is a lead coach, and based on the needs of the CEO and senior level executives, we rope in other coaches who may be coming for a shorter period of time to provide that impetus for that person. So that's what we said. Coaching has the advantage of curating a program for the individual. And I think this anchor coaching, as we call it, is probably a good example of curating a coaching process, which is very much for the individual.
Sounds very exciting, Deepak. No doubt a topic for a future webinar as we discuss that. But really, thank you everyone for joining us. We're very happy to host you and talk through a little bit. Hopefully you've walked away now with a much clearer understanding of, as a coachee, what you could take away, how you could make the best and really maximize your potential through this very unique and special offering of coaching. So thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.